Welcome to my space and thoughts on all things health. Guess who's back? Dr. Rose Misati. I feel like calling her our in-house doctor. We are back. You guys asked. There was a huge request for her to be back, and so she's back this year. Karibu sana.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Thank you. This series we are going to be on is going to be a heavy one. Mm-hmm. We're going to be dealing with childhood trauma. Are you ready? Childhood trauma. Many of us have experienced it. Others don't know they have. But in this, it's going to be a four series episodes of the topic. We're going to learn more about it. And I'd like to introduce her to those who don't know her. And if you have not, please just stop this video here, go back and go watch the other 5 episodes we did with her. And then you can come back and catch up. You can always come back to it. So she is a doctor, not a physical doctor, but she's a certified family trauma professional, and she is a cognitive behavior therapist and a parenting and relationships coach. She has many years of experience under her belt. She has dealt with a number of patients. She was just telling me from the age of 70 all the way down, I think, to teenage years.
Yes, even children.
Even children. So she has her authority to be here and tell us more about it. So we wanted to begin with childhood trauma. What is childhood trauma? And we won't deal with a lot of it because there's just a few common manifestations of it. But first of all, what is childhood trauma?
Thank you so much. This is a very wide topic. And so just to emphasize what you've said, we will not cover everything. Yes. We're just going to barely scratch the surface. So what is trauma? Trauma has been described in many ways, and I will give a few working definitions. Trauma is any adverse experience that somebody goes through that overwhelms their ability to cope. So it's an adverse experience or negative experience that an individual goes through that overwhelms their capacity to cope. So they're not able to cope with it. So when we talk about childhood, we mean whatever happened to somebody between the ages of 0 to 17. That's the definition. So we can now say it's an adverse experience that somebody experiences during the ages of 0 to 17 that overwhelms their capacity or their ability to cope. Sometimes it even puts simply that it's something that was done to you that shouldn't have been done to you. Or something that was not done to you that should have been done to you. So omission or commission.
That part.
Yes.
Something that should have been done to me but wasn't done to me.
Yes, to you or for you.
Or for
me. But it wasn't done. Yes. And many people, just as you've said, that many of us have gone through trauma. Can I just say everybody has gone through trauma? When I talk to somebody and they're telling me I had a perfect childhood, perfect parents, already right there, I know that's a problem because that's denial. None of us inherited a perfect childhood. None of us had perfect parents. Even me, who is helping people heal, I'm not a perfect parent. I have traumatized my own children and they're seeking their own healing. So that's it. It's human nature. We are not perfect. We will traumatize each other.
No, but I grew up in a wealthy family and my parents loved me and they gave me everything I needed and I was fine. So I never experienced any form of trauma. I went to the best schools.
So great. So 2 perspectives. Number 1, trauma does not necessarily have to be caused by your parent. It can be because of the community that you're living in. Maybe there's violence, insecurity. It can be because of the school you've gone to. You've gone through trauma in the school setup. You have other caregivers. You have teachers. You have other older, maybe students who bullied you. And then another thing is that there is where we miss it. When we say I had everything. In fact, let me tell you something. Someone told me the other day in a panel discussion, and I agree with them, that contrary to what we used to say that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, and clothing. This person said love or emotional connection is at the lowest before you even go to food, shelter, and clothing. So the fact that a parent has given their child everything, materially speaking, does not mean that the child will not be traumatized. Have they been emotionally present? And I think that we will talk about it later. Emotionally present. Because many parents, unfortunately, who are busy working to provide, including myself, we are not present for the children. And that traumatizes.
Wow. So if I'm above 18 and my trauma came after, that's not childhood trauma.
Now, it's not childhood trauma, but
Or
it's
where are we
trauma
focusing on
nevertheless.
children?
Oh, that's a good question. We are focusing on children because, number one, children are dependent. Children depend on adults for all their needs, physical, emotional, spiritual, and social. So a child has got no capacity to do certain things because they are depending on an adult to provide for them. Another thing is that children are vulnerable. That means when you're dependent on somebody, you're actually vulnerable because it's the person to decide whether to give you, when, and how to give you. Okay, so children are in their developmental stage. They are very impressionable, so they are easily impacted. And then again, their brain is developing, forming new neural connections. Even physically, their bodies are developing. So that makes children vulnerable. If a child has been raised with skills, by the time they get to over 18, yes, you will be traumatized, but then, you know, by that time, if you have been equipped with skills, as I said, you know that if I'm stressed, you know, I can reach out to a friend, a family member, a professional. If this environment is not good for me, maybe to work, I can work myself out of this job. If maybe my parents are traumatizing me, you know, maybe you're working, you have a job, you can say, you know what, I can move. But a child does not have that agency, does not have that capacity to make such a decision. Yes.
And so this childhood trauma, how does it affect an individual?
Childhood trauma, by the way, I always say that it should be declared a pandemic. Because childhood trauma completely changes somebody depending again on the extent. Because first it affects the brain. Because what happens when somebody is on survival mode, we call it survival mode. Because when somebody is traumatized, they are wondering, am I safe? So they are very hyper vigilant. Okay. Wherever they are, they are wondering, okay, am I safe? So they have no time to develop what we call the executive functions of the brain. That is decision making, judgment, learning ability. Because they are depending on, they just want to be safe. Picture it this way. You see a tiger. I know most of us will never see a tiger in their lifetime. But then if you see a tiger, at that time your body goes on fight, flight mode. That is not even the time to start thinking and making rational decisions.
No.
So imagine for a child who is being traumatized every day, it's like the tiger is coming home every day. They are with a tiger every day.
Okay.
You see. So even the ability to develop is a problem. It can also manifest in bodily symptoms. Somebody starts having gastrointestinal, gut problems. Their fear center, ulcers, their fear center is activated. So trauma affects the entire system. Their immune system is activated. Because now the body prepares, when the body is preparing for fight or flight or whatever, the immune system is activated so that should you be injured, then the body can heal itself. But now imagine you're activating the immune system every day. Autoimmune conditions, the conditions where the body fights against itself. Those are the autoimmune. Cancers, because cancers essentially, psychiatrists have actually said, you can read online the articles like that, cancer begins with the brain. Stress. It's essentially a stress disease. So it predisposes somebody to a lot of diseases. So the body as well as the brain gets affected. So trauma is pervasive. It affects the individual. And a low self-esteem. Because somebody feels I'm not good enough, that's why I'm suffering like this. It makes them make wrong choices because they're looking for a way of numbing the pain. Let me shock you. Many people who are struggling with weight issues, they experience childhood trauma. And in fact, it has even been said, sexual trauma. Yeah?
I think you mentioned this in one of
the
videos.
One of the videos. Because either it's a way of eating to numb the pain or eating to look as unattractive as possible so that nobody will be attracted. Can I use that word? To them. Yeah. So there's a lot of wrong choices that somebody makes because of having gone through childhood trauma. It's a wide array of problems related to childhood trauma.
Wow. Yeah. Cancers could be caused by childhood trauma. I think that is the only thing I'm hearing in my head. Autoimmune diseases.
Yes, because cancer, let me explain to you something. Because cancer, and I'm not saying that all cancers are caused by trauma, but what I'm saying is that cancer essentially is a stress disease. Everybody, research has shown from the University of Johns Hopkins University, so you can check that online, research has shown that everybody has cancer cells in their body. Everybody.
Yes, that is true.
When we are leading a healthy lifestyle, we mop up the cancer cells. But now when somebody has experienced childhood trauma and they continue getting re-traumatized, their immunity is weak. So that means then they are predisposed to having cancer and other diseases related to immunity, not just immunity, but even other systems of the body.
Can this childhood trauma also affect my career choice? Or my spirituality?
A lot. To begin with, when somebody has gone through childhood trauma, they feel like they don't matter. So they have a low self-esteem. And remember we said executive functioning is affected. So learning ability. And that's why I tell teachers that many times when you see a child is daydreaming, they are not concentrating, and then they keep on, some of them punished, that they need to work hard. Parents get tutor after tutor. Yeah. Maybe the child does not need a tutor. They need somebody to talk to them. They need to be helped professionally because of the childhood trauma. So it affects learning ability.
I hope the parents are listening.
Exactly. And then sometimes it also influences career choice, whereby people want to get into careers, helping professions. In fact, I read somewhere that most of us in the helping professions are doing it out of a childhood trauma. And it's okay once you have healed, because now the trauma becomes a force for good, because now you can help other people. But if you have not healed, you end up hurting other people.
As you're trying to heal.
Exactly, as you're trying to heal. So the choice, you were talking about career choice. So definitely performance will be a problem. And then the career choice will be influenced by the trauma, by the pain. Yes, and then there's something else that you said, can it affect what?
Spirituality.
It affects spirituality, because when a child has been traumatized by, especially their primary caregivers, their parents, and the parents are the ones who, can I just say the parents are the ones who represent God for the child? I mean,
the form of God in their lives.
The form of God in their lives. So how do you start convincing a child, even as they grow to become an adult, that God loves you so much unconditionally? And me, the person that I knew, or the parent who was supposed to love me, would beat me up and shout at me and yell at me. So it's very difficult to connect to a God who is so loving when you haven't experienced that love. It's very difficult. Before 13 years and below, the concept of God is very abstract in the mind of a child. One time I was walking with my son, and then he says, I'm telling him we are doing a prayer walk. He's 9. Then he said, now I'm talking to God and he's not answering. You're telling me to just talk to God, but he's not answering. So I'm like, yeah, he's hard, but how? How will he answer? Me, I want him to come here and talk to me. And because for him, he's not getting it, that he talks to me. How? So the way I'm going to respond to the needs of this child is the way he's going to experience God. Now, before he grows to that age of, he begins to seek understanding for himself.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. I have so many questions.
Yes.
But most importantly, I know that childhood trauma affects our relationships.
It does.
But we're not going into that. So guys, let me just say, I want us to put a pause there. For the next episode, we are going to come back and discuss that. But the fact that you've said that childhood trauma could be omission or commission, I think you guys need to go check that out. Because some people think because they had everything, that they are fine.
Yes, and I think it may help for us to break it down a little bit for people to understand how does it look like. How does childhood trauma look like? So childhood trauma looks like if you lost a parent to death. For example, if your parent died, and most of the time, parents or adults have got no skills to help a child grieve. So you will find when a child has lost a family member, they are ignored. Nobody takes a child through grief, okay? So if you lost a parent or a close family member as a child, let's talk about 0 to 17, because we are talking about childhood trauma.
Yes.
If, for example, you lived with a parent who was mentally ill, if you lived with a parent who was mentally ill, and here I'm consciously aware that there are many people who are mentally ill but they are not diagnosed and they are parenting. Because the World Health Organization shows that the mental health gap in Kenya, even in Africa, is very wide. So there are people who are mentally sick, but they are not in any form of care, either psychiatric or psychological.
So they're just living their everyday lives. Everyday lives,
but they are traumatizing their families. Because either you will find this parent is struggling with depression, anxiety, whatever. So because they are dealing with this heavy mental issue, they are not emotionally present for their children to feel and experience and provide for the emotional needs of the child.
So that will be commission.
That
commission.
No, that would be commission.
Commission.
Omission actually.
Be omission.
Because they are not emotionally
present for me.
Yes. If you grew up in a household where a family member went to prison, maybe it's your father, your mother, even your siblings, someone, even your grandparents, your uncle, maybe they were living with you, they went to prison, a child feels abandoned. And children have egocentric thinking. So when something happens, they take it very personal. It's because I'm a bad child, that's why this happened. If you grew up in a family where there was violence, either emotional or physical, you witnessed a parent or a sibling being abused, or you were abused. So even when a child witnesses another family member being abused, they take it personal. So they re-experience it. If you were abused as a child, if your parents threatened you, they shook you so hard, they beat you up and you were very scared. If you were sexually violated or molested, your boundaries were violated by somebody who is older than you. If you were shouted at and yelled at until you actually got scared. If you grew up in a family where there was extreme poverty, you didn't get adequate food, you wore dirty old clothes, you were sick but you could not be taken to hospital, childhood trauma. If you grew up in a family where a member struggled with problem drinking or smoking, addictions, they had an addiction that was affecting them, childhood trauma.
Many African homes.
Many African homes, that is true, I can relate. If you grew up in a family where you felt like your parents are not emotionally present for you, like you felt like they cannot connect with you. So you are feeling like nobody is there for you, nobody can believe you. Maybe you are bullied at school, but you can't tell anybody. That means that you felt nobody will listen to you, nobody will believe you. So if you felt like there was no that emotional connection. In many homes, when I talk to people, your generation, my generation, what they tell me is, was there really a home where there was emotional connection? Because I tell them, if you can't remember a time in your family where you bonded minus food, minus gifts, minus an outing. You get what I'm saying?
None.
So there's no bonding at the dinner table. That is not bonding because the food masks that you're eating. You're eating.
So you mean we just sit like this?
You just sit like this and you're connecting. Either you're there on the floor or something and there's no TV.
Okay, if your family has experienced that, please write in the comment. Could there be any African home that they sat and just talked?
Let me tell you.
Not Christmas time, not New Year.
Not birthday.
Not birthday.
Not going out
not
to
going
family
out.
functions.
No.
Let me tell you, when I talk to people, they laugh. But for me, I can remember. And you know how you know that's important? These are moments that a child never forgets. That's I can remember how we used to sit by the fireplace. We didn't have electricity and we didn't have kerosene. But then we would light a fire. Maybe I've come from Nairobi, high school or university. We sit by the fireplace and the room is dark because, you don't have any lighting. And we would sit there and we talk, my mother and my siblings. My father died. My mother and my siblings. We talk until 1, 2 a.m. And we just cooling stories. We chap a story.
My mom told me they did that by the fire. I think maybe
that connection.
That generation, you guys had time.
That connection. But I do right now, I do with my children. I do with my son. We just like my 9-year-old is the one who's at home. Like now, today, Friday.
So you're intentional about it?
I'm intentional. You have to be intentional. Okay. I go and we jump and we're like, a ring, and whatever. We go on the floor. I meet him. Emotional connection is meeting somebody at their point. At the point of need. Where they can experience you. If a child is on the floor with toys, go on the floor with toys. That's connection. If they are playing, kati or skipping a rope, skip, hula hoop, you do it. That emotional connection. So if you didn't have that, that's a source of childhood trauma. And then in the community, now that's in the home, in the community. If you grew up in a community whereby, there was violence, and gun violence maybe, you were attacked, like personally we've been attacked twice and my children have been traumatized.
Wow.
If you experience that is childhood trauma. Yes.
I think it's safe to say I have childhood trauma. This is a lot. So let's just put a pin there, and then when we come back next week, we'll discuss how it affects our relationships.
Fantastic.
In the family, with friends and colleagues everywhere. So guys, next week, please come back. We are going to go to the next episode of this. Thank you for staying on. Be sure to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Ciao.